Okay, hi everybody. I just happy Resurrection Day and happy Passover. I wish you were here. I really love you, and I wish I could look in your eyes on a regular Sunday and just show you and tell you how much I love you. I hope I can get through this. I remember when I came, I felt like I was pushed out of some machine and plopped here. And I loved you so much. And I still love you so much. I wanted to kiss your hands and your feet. You were the army of God that waited for me to welcome me into the faith. My name is Liat, and I was born in 1970 in Jaffa, Israel, to a beautiful family of immigrants. I'm first generation Israeli. My parents immigrated from Egypt, and I grew up in a neighborhood where everybody was immigrants. Some people came from Europe after the Holocaust. Some people came from the Middle East after Israel was founded. And Israel was a 22-year-old young state of survivors that are trying to build a country. And I was born very sensitive and very, very, very sensitive. And so there was no space for me. Somehow I found food as a comfort early on in my life. And I grew up in a very hostile environment, and so food really comforted me. And I also grew up in a really anti-Christ environment. I was told, we didn't really talk about Jesus. Jesus was a forbidden subject almost. I remember a story that my mom told me. She spent some time in France, and she had to go to a ministry where nuns taught them, and they would hit her with a stick on her left hand because she was left-handed. And anything that had to do with Jesus was related to Nazi Germany, Holocaust, really bad things that happened to Jewish people. And so Jesus was a bad word. That was just a side subject. I continued to grow up in that place. And when I was 17, I was very depressed and wanted to commit suicide. And that's where I was introduced to 12-step recovery program for eating disorders. And it was the first time that I was asked to find a higher power. I grew up in a secular home, although we celebrated all the holidays, the Jewish holidays, and the Sabbath, and we kept kosher, but we didn't go to synagogue or anything like that. It was a Jewish state. Everybody was Jewish. And so here that program of recovery told me that I had to find a power greater than myself to overcome food addiction, because it was a really powerful addiction to overcome. So that was where my journey of finding a higher power began. I went through my military service, and right after my military service, I came to the United States. I really, really wanted to recover from food addiction, and I knew that this program of recovery started here in the United States, so this is why I came. So I went to the rooms of food addiction, and I couldn't find a solution for there, so I decided to go to sister program for alcohol and drugs, and that's where I met Greg, my husband, my beautiful husband, and we fell in love, we got married, and we started having a family and beautiful children. At the beginning of our marriage, everybody was really worried, what are you going to raise the kids as, Jewish or Christian? And I had that, I'm from recovery program, everybody is the same, everyone has a God of their understanding. So that was my mindset at the time. My husband's mentor encouraged us to go to a Christian Science church. And so we spent a few years at Christian Science with our little children, with Cole and Abby. And I couldn't hear the word Jesus. It was just, every time I heard it, I couldn't hear it. It was just, it was offensive to me. And so at some point I couldn't go there anymore. And Greg slowly drifted into Catholicism, which is his childhood religion, and that made it even worse. And so I couldn't even pay respect and go with him. If I would go in the holidays, the whole family will feel my energy. I couldn't stand the rituals. I couldn't stand anything. I really felt betraying my people when I would go to church or when I would hear or participate in celebration of Jesus. And so something happened to me in 2000, and God freed me from food addiction. And it's very clear to me that God did that. But at the same time, I didn't have my comfort drug. And so feelings, emotions, behaviors came up, and I knew that the God of my understanding had to grow. So Greg was going to Christianity, and I decided that I need to go to Judaism, and I went to Orthodox Judaism. Nathan was born, and we had a family, and they were going to Christian church, and I wanted them to go to learn about their Jewish roots. And so I love the Orthodox. I actually chose Orthodox Judaism. I didn't want to go to Reform because of the reverence that was shown, the love for God when they opened the Ark and people walked by and kissed the Torah. It really touched my heart, and I felt some holiness that I really wanted to get to that place of holiness with God, where I felt that's where closeness to God would be, is if I felt His holiness. And so I continued to go to the Orthodox synagogue, and the children will come with me on Saturday to synagogue, and with Greg to Christian. And then at some point Greg wanted the kids to be baptized, and because they had a Brit, they were circumcised, I had to compromise and have them be baptized. And I remember going to church, and they were getting ready to be baptized, and I went to the bathroom, and this old lady rubbed her hands together, and she was so happy. She said, "Oh, look at all those Christian little boys and girls are getting baptized today." And I couldn't stop crying because my children were Jewish. I'm a Jewish mother, and they couldn't be Christian, and it was almost like war on from here on. I'm going to be a real Jewish mom, and I'll show them that Judaism is the way. And Greg, at some point, I remember actually in that baptism, I was just bawling. I was crying so bad. I felt like I'm betraying my people. And Greg, and people thought that I was crying out of joy, And so, but anyways, Greg was going to Christianity and really he decided that maybe he needs to show me and explain to me why this is truth. And so he was studying, and he had piles and piles of books, and he would have to hide them and turn them around. This was a secret world that he lived for many, many years. studying Jewish objections, studying why, learning why Jewish people don't believe in God, in Yeshua, in Jesus. And so at some point he tried to explain to me, and he said, look, Liat, I believe in the same God, God of Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac. I believe in the same God. And I said, well, if you believe in the same God, why can't you just be Jewish? Why do you need this Jesus stuff? That will help our marriage. We really, the marriage was very suffering a lot. The children were pulled apart. It was just a horrible experience. And he couldn't not believe in Jesus. The more he dug in there, the more he got closer to the truth. And I was going to the Orthodox synagogue and was trying to learn about how to pray right, what things I need to do. And there was a lot of rituals and a lot of things that I had to do. I couldn't sing in synagogue because women can't sing, men cannot hear their voices. I couldn't kiss the Torah when it went by because I wasn't holy. I was told by rabbis that I have to divorce or not let my husband touch me, or different things. My husband was not even counted as the father of my children. We would go to synagogue. If he tried to be a part of it, they wouldn't let him open the ark, or he was treated really bad. When the children, our boys, got up to the Torah, they would bless them under my name and not his name. And slow by slow, something happened to me. I started to feel that this is a very exclusive, sorry, I didn't know. It's a very exclusive society. And I started to feel that it was not right for me to be a part of such an exclusive society, that only the Jew is welcome, that they'll donate organs only to Jewish people, and there's so many things that I started to hear. And the last time that I was there is one Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, where we went, and Greg said, I'm going home, I can't be here, I'm not welcomed here. And something happened to me, and I said, you're right, I'm going home with you. I vowed that I am never going to be in a place where my husband is not looked at as equal or as welcomed and loved as I am. And that was the end of my time in Orthodox Judaism. But I had to find a higher power. And my new higher power was truth, love, beauty, and justice. I decided, that's it. This is my new God. This is the God that will save me. It was kind of something that I was handed down from someone else, and I tried it, and I asked Greg to bless it. We started to go to counseling, and I said, I need you to say that my God of my understanding is complete and truth, and it's fine, and I don't need to have any other God. And Greg couldn't do it. And I was really mad at him because I thought it was not spiritual on his part, that he would not accept it. He didn't put it, or he didn't belittle it, but he couldn't give me that validation that I needed, that God is, my God of my understanding is complete. At the time we went to Christian counseling, we decided that we need help. And it happened to be that the therapist was a Jewish believer in Jesus. Well, to me, he was not Jewish anymore, he was Christian. He crossed over to the other side. But he was such a sweet and loving man that we stayed, and he taught us a lot about how to talk to each other and how to listen to each other, and that really helped. I wanted to say something about this church, is that Deborah Porzio, she took me through a path, and at some point, and she heard all about my not liking in a light way, Christians and my husband and anybody that has, that loves Jesus. And she told me about Joel, and she said, there is this pastor, and he has a Jewish background, and I'm going to the church, and he's taking us through Exodus with Jewish roots. And I was just, after I told her all those things of how I hate Christianity, and she was supposed to be tolerant and loving toward me, she tells me that, and I said, I just thought everyone who is Christian is trying to convert everybody else into Christianity. That's their purpose in life. I remember when the kids were building missions, I hated those missions because even the country thinks that Christian did good by taking, the religion of Native Americans from them and turning them into Christians. So I also thought that Christians were very simple. I'm sorry if I'm bashing. I don't think that way at all today. But I thought I couldn't also believe because I thought they were simple-minded, or they go with a herd that everybody believes what everybody believes. I just didn't understand, how can you believe in this? But something happened to me. I started breaking down. I took another round in a recovery, and I was asked to make face-to-face amends with my family. And I had to admit to them that I didn't let them worship the God of their understanding, that I forced them to believe in the God of my understanding, or I wasn't tolerant and loving toward them in that regard. And I had to do it face to face. Obviously, there was no living amend here because I was not changing. So when I made the amends to Greg and Nathan and Cole, they were loving to me and stuff. But then when I made it to Abby, it was really hard. Because Abby came to faith when she was 9 on her own. And she didn't have the mother, the loving mother. She was even afraid to tell me anything about it because she felt that I wouldn't love her if she shared it with me. And I got to, one of the things in my whole life I really, really worked on is being a good, great person. If I could just be a great mother, if I could just be the best of this and the best of I'm a preschool teacher, the best preschool teacher, people will beg to have the children with me because I'm so great. In recovery programs, if I could be the best speaker, the most inspiring person in this world, then I would be okay. I had this idea that if I was great, then I would feel okay with myself. And I worked so hard to be great. But around that time, which is about over 2 years ago, everything broke down in front of my eyes. I just saw that I wasn't the best mother. Far from that. I could never be the best anything. I just felt like I couldn't be the best of anything. And I was kind of in a trouble here because I didn't have the energy to fight anymore and to try to be the best. I saw how flawed and broken I am, and I just didn't know what to do. And so I remember walking with Greg, and I was just, I couldn't even stand. I was falling on my knees, crying constantly. And gosh, I hope and I started also, I was going through this spiritual battle. I would ask questions because it felt to me like Greg knew more than I do. And so I would ask him questions, and I hated his answers because it was always back to Jesus or some Bible explanation, and I just couldn't. I wanted answers. I had questions. I wanted answers, but I rejected all the answers. And I remember I read the book The Shack, and I felt through the book that the author, Paul Young, had this kind of vague God, like this loving God, not religious God. So we were, a friend of us invited us to hear him talk. And I waited in line after his talk that he will bless my God of love, justice, truth, and beauty. And I said, could you please bless my God, because that's what I believe in, and you're a free spirit, right? And we're together on this. And he looked at me and he said, did you ever read the New Testament? And I was like, you're one of them. You want to convert me, and I just felt so betrayed by him, and I felt so lost. I mean, there was nowhere to go, and I was broken. I was just complete mess. I wasn't depressed, though. I remember not being depressed, because I have suffered from depression in my life, but I felt that I was at the end of me. I exhausted every idea of how to be a good person, of how to connect with God, and I wasn't connected, and I started walking around. I felt, I am not connected. I don't feel connection with God. And that's when I had 3 dreams. God came to me. I don't deserve it. I know I don't deserve it. And I don't feel it like I don't deserve it, like I'm a bad person, or, I just know I don't deserve it, and I will never deserve it. I will never deserve. So I went to sleep not believing in Jesus and not wanting to believe in Jesus. And I had a dream that my mom comes in the middle of the night and she calls me, Liat, Liat, Kumi, Yeshua wa Mashiach. She woke me up and she said, wake up, wake up. Yeshua is the Messiah. And I woke up that day and I knew he was the Messiah. I don't know, I can't explain it. It wasn't a dream, it was some transformation. I went through some spiritual surgery. I don't know what happened that night. But I woke up believing. I didn't know who Yeshua was. I didn't hear the name Yeshua in my life. The name that I heard was Yeshu. In Israel, people call him Yeshu, which means it's a curse that's been put on him a long time ago, and it means may his name be blotted and forgotten forever. It's abbreviation. And so for the first time I heard the word Yeshua, and I was a changed person. And then about a night after, I woke up yelling Yeshua, Yeshua in the middle of the night. And I knew I walked around a different person. I felt my inside were different. And there was the last night, I went on my knees and I said, Abba, if this is truth, and I need to follow Yeshua, please give me one more dream. And I got one more dream. Hallelujah. And the dream was just someone from our program that always claims, that I hated that he claimed it, that his God is Yeshua, Jesus is Lord. He was in the sky, bigger than life, and he was reading Psalms or I saw the biblical words in the sky, and there was fireworks everywhere. And I woke up and I knew, and I wrote on the board, Yeshua. And I had to tell my family, and I remember sitting with Nathan and Abby and Greg, and they were dumb. How do you say it? They were like dumbfounded. They were like, they couldn't believe. For a while, even saying Yeshua or Jesus in the house was very difficult because it was so forbidden. They were in shock. Oh my gosh, so much happened, and I need to close. I woke up a different person. This dream is not a dream. I know God reached to me. I've never read At that point, I never read the New Covenant. I didn't know anything about it. I thought it was a Christian Nazi, so I don't know. I didn't even know who was going to come out of that book. You know, Santa Claus. I don't know what would come out of that. I didn't know anything about it. The first thing I did, I wanted to hear it from Jewish Israelis, if anybody knew. I didn't know that there's people that believed in Jesus that were not Jewish. I mean, I knew that guy. You know, I guess I was terrified. I loved being Jewish. I loved being Jewish. I always loved being Jewish. And I was terrified that my Judaism will be taken away from me. So I went online and I typed Lama Yeshua, which means why Yeshua. And I was connected with a ministry in Israel, an Israeli Jewish ministry of believers that explained to me things about Yeshua and things that I didn't understand, and it also made sense with my breaking down. They explained to me about being a sinner, and in Hebrew, sin means chet. Chet means to miss the mark, and they talked about it. And they explained to me how we all try, but we miss the mark. And the whole thing of being a great mother and the hard work that I put into being a great teacher and a great that and great, so you guys can see me as great, was impossible. It was impossible. I could never be great. I could be, okay, I could love you. I can do my best, but I can't be that. I can't reach that level of greatness. I can't, I tried to be God, or I don't know what I was trying to be. Also, something that I didn't understand, I was really upset, is why would you kill a man? What's the whole thing with blood? What does that have to do with anything? And I got to see that this was a system that was placed before Yeshua came. The system of blood sacrifice. And when I was a little girl, my father used to take me on the Day of Atonement, on Yom Kippur. He used to take me to a rabbi, and the rabbi will slaughter a chicken, and they would bless me over with a slaughtered chicken. They would bless us for atonement. And all of a sudden, everything came together. And I felt, and I still feel, more Jewish than I've ever been. I am more complete. I'm a complete Jewish woman, and I understand today that the whole plan, I understand it. Thank you, God. Hallelujah. I understand that that's what He wanted. He wanted us to be, He wanted all of us. It was not a plan only for the Jewish people. It was a plan for the world. This is a story for the world. Gosh, I know I'm going to finish in a second. I just want to tell you how much I love you. And truthfully, I loved only Jewish people. I tried to be loving, but truthfully, I connected only Jewish. And that's what happened to me when this came. When I came to faith, this veil lifted from me, and I just felt so much love to everybody, equal love. And it's so incredible. And I know how much God loves you. If He reached to me, He's alive. I know that. He's alive. He's still working. And I just want to close with something that happened to me in this church. There was one, and I cry a lot here because I'm really touched, really. I was listening to someone that came to faith 40 years ago, and he just speaks without a tear in his eye. I hope one day I'll be able to be more clear and speak without tears in my eyes. But there was a song here, the worship. This is the house of God for me. And I'm really humble to be here. And thank you for loving me. There was a song that once, after a few weeks that I was here, that was sung here. And it was, what was the song? I never once did we ever walked alone. And I remember I had a really rough childhood. And I remember I had a flashback of something horrible that happened to me as a little girl. And while Corey was singing that song, I saw Jesus in the room with me while this horrible thing happened to me. So I know that Yeshua Jesus was here the whole time. I know He's with you. Pray for Him to show up in your dreams. I tell my family all the time, pray for Him to come to you. He is here. He loves you, and I love you too. Thank you.
That's a hard act to follow. So I'm not necessarily going to try to follow it. I want to follow it with the words of another radically changed Jewish person. He is writing a letter to a church in Philippi. And there's this conflict about Judaism and followers of the Jew, Yeshua, who we know as Jesus. And he gives good Jewish credentials. He talks about being circumcised. He talks about the fact that he belonged to the group called the Pharisees, and that he was so zealous for the one true God that he even persecuted Christians. But like Liat, he had a personal encounter. No one convinced him. No one argued him in. He had a personal encounter with Yeshua, Jesus, on the road to Damascus. And so as he's writing this letter, he says to them, I consider everything a loss compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ, that's Messiah, Jesus, my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them rubbish, that I might gain Christ. Something had awoken in him. And the best way that he could explain it was, all that good work, all those rules that I had kept, all that I used to be proud of, I now consider thrown away in the dump, in sewage, garbage, compared to this personal knowing. Not a distant relationship, but a personal knowing of Yeshua, who we know as Jesus. Imagine that kind of radical experience. And then he explains how he came across this. For he said, for we are now found, this is, by the way, Philippians chapter 3. I'm in verse 9. To be found in him, being Jesus, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law. I no longer receive this righteousness by keeping all the rules, but that which is through faith in Christ is a righteousness that comes from God and is by faith. Just as Abraham is declared righteous by faith in Genesis, when he believed and trusted God. And this isn't something new, right? The prophets testify to this. Let me just read you this very quickly from Isaiah 53, starting in verse 9. Who do you think he's talking about? He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. He was innocent. Yet it was by the Lord's will. When does the Lord ever crush the innocent? Yet it was by the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life a guilt offering. You know that chicken, Day of Atonement? He made this person's life a guilt offering. He will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After the suffering of his soul, he will be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many. And notice this in Isaiah. Hundreds of years before Yeshua. And he will bear their iniquities. He will bear their iniquities. Therefore, verse 12, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and he was numbered among the transgressors. He, though he was without sin, was considered among the transgressors. For what? He bore the sin of many, and he made intercession for their transgression. Just like the sacrificial system in the Hebrew Scriptures laid out this intermarried blood of animals for the forgiveness of sins, Jesus, Yeshua, which means God saves, who is the Christ, became for us forgiveness of sins. Not because of what we did, but because of what He did on our behalf. He closes up this letter, Philippians 3, 10 through 11. He says this, I want to know Christ. It's the same knowing. It's personal. It's intimate. It's kind of like sitting on your daddy's lap. I want to know Christ and the power of His resurrection. And, he says, the fellowship of sharing in His sufferings, becoming like Him in His death. How did He suffer? The Messiah suffered because He came to bring the good news. In the same way, Paul wants to go out, and he knows it may not be a popular message. He knows that folks may look at him and go, he's a betrayer of the Jewish people. Others may say he's crazy. It doesn't make sense. But he'd rather suffer because Jesus suffered for this good news. And so somehow, to attain what? The resurrection from the dead. The first resurrection is the one that Liat felt. It's when God cleanses you and the Holy Spirit can enter you as if you were the Holy of Holies. God's presence in you, and your life is changed. That doesn't mean the old nature isn't still there. It just means God can begin to work a new nature in you, because the other resurrection is the resurrection of souls when this life is done, that rise to God, the righteous one. And only His righteous children get to be with Him. But here's the good news. It's not by your righteousness, and it's definitely not by my righteousness, that we were made the children of God. It is His work on our behalf. And as kids, we just have faith. We just trust our daddy that that is what He did. And so if you are a follower of Jesus, if you are a follower of Yeshua, celebrate this day, because you don't deserve this. But He gives you this gift nonetheless. If you've been far from Him, know that the most important thing in His heart isn't that you get it all right, but that you know Him. That you come into Him and allow Him to get things right in you. And if you're far from Him, and you're only listening to this because you had nothing better to do, or you're a good friend of Liat's, I would challenge you not to believe because I'm here to convert you. No, I'm here to just tell you the same thing Liat did. We had an experience with a risen Christ. And it changed our lives, and we hope it changes yours too. If you seek, you will find. You don't believe it exists? Fine. Read the Scriptures, just the Hebrew Scriptures. And ask yourself, what do they point to? When is this problem that we find from the very beginning, Genesis chapter 3, where there's brokenness between God and between each other, when is it ever fixed? And how does God say it's going to be fixed? And I believe you will find the truth. And the truth is why we celebrate today. He is risen, and so will we. Let's celebrate this with the one family who all are musicians, so they can be really close together and lead us in praise and worship, and we're thankful for that. Let's join the Lupulus in one last song. you.